Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am the owner of Transformational Solutions, a life coaching business that specializes in addiction, trauma, and self-destructive behaviors. I'm an author, podcast host, group facilitator, speaker, and co-creator of the online 8-week self-development course, The Visions Program.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, a business entrepreneur, dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, California's leading dual diagnosis and mental health treatment centers, focusing on comprehensive and immersive treatment experiences with a network of facilities and dedicated professionals committed to providing each and every client the intimacy of care they so richly deserve.
This is the Got Mental Health Podcast, a fun, open, and safe space where we talk to experts, thought leaders, and professionals in the mental health field.
Our goal is to educate, inspire, and empower people to take care of their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Join us weekly to hear Arthur talk like this as we talk all things mental health.
Follow us wherever you go to get your podcasts.
And don't forget to rate and review as it really supports our show. Thank you so much for your support.
Thanks, guys.
And keep listening to Arthur. Welcome, everyone, to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Cove, along with my co-host, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
Whatever. I am so excited to have our guest, Jessica Fieldman, on the show. Hi, Jess.
Hi, guys.
I'm so happy you're here. Jessica is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has been working in the recovery field since switching careers in 2016. She has a private practice where she sees individuals and couples with issues ranging from anxiety, depression, adulting, relationship issues, recovery, and fertility. She has completed the level 1 training for sensory motor psychotherapy and uses that as well as many other modalities in her practice. She relies on her humor, knowledge, experience, but mostly just comes to the therapy room as another human. She's a mom of 2 young boys, a wife, daughter, sister, yogi, sushi eater, and friend. And you're here today to talk about sex.
Let's talk about
Sex, baby. Let's talk about
sex,
you and
baby.
me. So here's what I would like to start this off by saying. We just got excited to talk about sex.
Oh,
We did.
very
I
excited.
think a lot of people are excited to talk about sex. However, I think we live in a culture where sex is something that is very uncomfortable to talk about.
Yes.
And I want to start off with that. Why has sex become a topic that is so uncomfortable for most people to talk about?
Well-
we all love it. Who doesn't like orgasming?
Oh my God, how dare you say
Oh,
orgasm?
shit. I know.
Orgasm.
I want to say it's upbringing. It's going to be politics, religion, all the reasons why it's like taboo. It's like you can't talk about that thing. And obviously, like, I don't know. You guys are parents now. Like, can you
Right.
imagine having a conversation about sex with your kids?
Yes,
I
I've already
can.
had that conversation.
And that's what it
Yeah.
honestly kind of leads into your after question for your initial question. It's how do parents have a conversation about sex with their kids? I feel like that's the biggest looming question. How do they get to a state? Obviously, they've come from their own state of conversations and traumas around it, right?
Yes.
So it leads to how comfortable they would be in having that conversation with their kid.
Well, like I already have conversations.
Me
and,
too.
And I mean, we have little boys. We, understand. I'm a mom of 2 boys. I still shower with my kids and we talk about consent. Like he doesn't know I'm talking about consent, but I'm talking about consent when I say mommy's going to clean your penis or can mommy clean your butt today? And sometimes he says yes, and I do. And then sometimes he says no. And I'm like, okay, then here's the soap and go do it yourself.
So here's something I learned with my kid, and by no means am I shaming anyone by sharing my opinion. One of the mistakes I think parents make, and again, for anyone listening, this is not about shaming, this is about learning. You can call the body part what it is.
Right.
A penis is a penis. A vagina is a vagina. A vulva is a vulva. And I think I grew up in a time, and I know my parents grew up in a time where we wanted to go, it's like we wanted to change the penis to pee-pee.
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 Yeah.
Right?
Or wee-wee.
Wee-wee. And it's dangerous because pedophiles or people who target children, they go after children that don't have the language to describe what their genitals are.
Yeah.
So they can't go to the parent and define or describe what happened to them because they don't have the language for it.
Yeah.
So how important is it for parents to call it as it is? You got a penis, bro.
Yeah. And guess what? It needs to be washed.
Exactly.
And like, it's so funny that you say that, and my friend's gonna fucking kill me for saying this story on the air. But like, my son came up to me one day and was like, you know, blah blah blah, showed me his penis in the bathroom, and then like he like told the teacher, just being like, oh, that was funny, and like, you know, they had a serious talk about it, but it was like he had the words. He was just like, yeah, I had the words. So yeah.
Why do you think parents avoid this conversation?
Well, it's usually, you know, if you've read any Dan Siegel book,
Yeah.
you know, like Parenting from the Inside Out, it's usually their own shit.
Right.
So if I'm not comfortable talking about this stuff, why am I going to be comfortable talking to my
Sure.
kid about it?
It's
So-
interesting. How important would you say is it the relationship between the parents as a display to the child from a sexual standpoint, from a loving standpoint?
Like, yeah, it's about like anything, even like affection or how parents treat each other. Like the way you model it for your kids is
Right.
really going to be how it's okay. Like in my family, like teasing was a way to show affection. So like I thought that self-deprecating humor or like teasing my spouse or my partner was okay. And then one day my now husband, he looked at me, he goes, that wasn't funny when you made fun of me. And I'm like, no, but like that's how I show love. And he's like, no, that's not how you show love. And I'm like, oh, because we were modeled that, right? Just the way like teasing or how we show affection or how we talk about sex or if I give my partner a kiss, right? All of that. The kids pick up on it. They're smart.
They're so smart.
Right.
They're watching and observing absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
And I think if you have a kid, I've been preparing for this conversation with my son for a very long time because I wanted him to have an experience when he first asked me about what sex is. I didn't want it to be an awkward conversation. I didn't want it to be something he felt could be something he should feel embarrassed about because I remember running a group one time and I had about 10 guys in my group, and the topic of sex and porn addiction came up. And all of these men, the ages were all very different. Some were in their 20s, some were in their 50s, some were in their 40s, and they were struggling with substance abuse issues. And also, after they got sober, a lot of them struggled with porn addiction and sex addiction. So they came in to get treatment for substance abuse issues, and then after they got sober from the substances, they either developed a porn addiction, a sex addiction, or they had previously struggled with it before. And when the topic came up in group, it was incredible to see the relief that they had when we were making this conversation about sex and porn addiction okay, that I wasn't shaming them and that I was normalizing that this happens. Now, how did we get there? And the thing that they all said was, I wish it wasn't such an awkward conversation when I was a kid.
Completely.
What would you tell to a parent who's trying to, and their reasoning is to protect their child by not having these conversations or making, like, what type of advice would you give a parent?
Well, I would
like
actually
that?
say you're actually protecting them by having the conversation.
Oh, I
Right.
love that.
Right.
Right.
Because if you make it shameful, they're going to think it's shameful. And then whenever they at some point engage in some kind of sex, whether it's kissing or touching or anything or actual intercourse, it's like, that's, oh, maybe what I did was shameful. So by having the conversation, that's protecting them. That's saying it's okay to talk about. And if anything happens that feels uncomfortable, like we talk about it.
Being a girl dad, obviously it's a very unique and privileged position to be in. It's also very difficult, right? Because I take the stance of I want to always protect my daughter, especially in the world that we live in, right? What kind of advice can you give a girl dad? What the type of relationship around sex and relationships and love and stuff like that? Like, I don't want it to be a thing where we'll leave it up to the mom to have that conversation, right? Because especially I have such a great bond with my daughter. Like,
Yeah.
she listens to me, she trusts me. We have that relationship. So why shouldn't I take advantage of that in a sense and help guide in that process, right? But I feel like a lot of men in these situations, they're like, oh, I'm gonna kick that guy's butt, or you like a guy and he hurts you, well, let's go beat him up, or you're not gonna have a boyfriend until you're 35,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the mentality, right? So like, what kind of advice can you give a girl dad?
I would say model the behavior you want her to find in a partner, right? So if you want someone to respect her, respect your daughter, respect your wife, your partners, your girlfriends, whoever it is, and show the respect, if that's what you want her to find. If you want someone who's loving and doting, be loving and doting. If you want someone who's going to open doors for her, right? Like, if you're going to do all the things, like, they just pick up, right? We talked about, they just pick up on everything. So just model it. And then she's going to think, that's the kind of guy I want, because that's how I was treated, and that's how my mom was treated, and that's how my XYZ was treated.
I think that's the key to take out of this. It's modeling. It's not what you say, it's what you do, right? Because you can say a bunch of things, but it's actually what you're doing. That's the most important piece of this all.
Yeah.
And I think it's how you respond.
Yeah.
So I remember my son, this was literally a month ago. Mommy, what is sex? And if I responded, no, right? Or like, well, sex is a thing and a bird and a bee. Like,
birds and the bees.
the birds and the bee thing. Like,
Who came up with that?
I don't know. Like, that to me
That's
seems
definitely
way more
the
complicated
1950s.
than what sex is to me. But
No, you're gonna, next time when your son's like, what is sex? You're gonna be, let's talk about sex,
Baby, let's talk about you.
You're just gonna whip out in song.
anyway, but the other thing is, like, so you said the modeling, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to give an experience of how I've done that with my kid around consent.
Yeah.
And how to do these things without shaming them. So I noticed one day I was watching him at school, and he ran up to one of his friends at school and he hugged them. And when he got into the car, I said, hey, bud, it's so beautiful that you want to hug people. It's such a good feeling to hug someone. And also, I want you to really practice asking if someone wants a hug. And that's how I've been doing it with him since he was able to walk. I ask him, hey, do you want a hug? Hey, do you want a kiss? Do I do it 100% of the time? No. But I do it 95% of the time. And what he's learning from that is to go and ask someone if they want a hug. Ask a girl or a boy if they want a kiss.
Well, it's not only you're telling him, you're saying, like, I'm going to do it to you.
Yeah, and then I swear to God, 4 days later, I was at a pool party with him and his friend, and I was watching him in the pool, and he asked his friend, he was like, can I hug you, Ted? And it was like, oh.
He got it.
Right, but if I shamed him and was aggressive in my response, like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't hug people. You should ask for consent.
Like, he's never going to want to go give a hug.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's the same thing with sex.
Yeah.
And you know what's so funny? It's like my parents, I love them. And they're all about, like, affection and hugs and kisses and whatever. It's like, but they're like, go give grandpa and go give papa a hug. And I'm like, just like, no, don't make him give you a hug. Like, if he doesn't want to give a hug, don't make him.
Yeah.
So some days he doesn't. And I just tell my parents, sorry guys, he's not in the mood for a hug.
Yeah, well, I think it's a generational.
It is.
Go ahead. You're gonna ask a question.
No, I mean, I was actually going to make a point to what you were saying. As much as it's important to ask for consent to start something, it's also important to recognize when someone says stop. And so, like, with my daughter, like, if I'm being playful for her and hugging her and kissing her and throwing her around and all these things, she knows that if she says stop, like, I'm going to be like, okay, you said stop, I'm going to back up, right?
Perfect.
And so having that understanding that even if you're engaged in a physical relationship or whatever, when you hear that word, there's recognition.
Well, I think it's
or if you
also,
say it.
I also think it's important, like, if we're talking about boundaries, it's like, sometimes I want to give you a hug and you want to give Papa and Grammy a hug, and sometimes I don't. And guess what? You're allowed to change your mind, right? Same with, like, sex, too, with us. Like, sometimes I want to have sex with my husband, sometimes I don't. Like, same with boyfriends, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it is. It's like, it's not 100% of the time always what I want to do.
Okay, so now we're gonna switch gears a little bit here.
Okay. And not into parenting and more into...
Well, I actually have one question before you switch gears real quick. I really want to give the audience an understanding of why you chose the topic of sex and these types of relationships. Like, what, because I've known you for quite some time now. And, you started off with, I guess, one thing, or, what transitioned you to this field, this particular topic?
Okay, well, so many reasons. One, because I'm not afraid to talk about it. Like, I just felt like everyone's like, oh, do I want to go there? And it's like, who the hell cares, right? And then some background on me is in recovery, I actually went to SLAW, which is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. So I personally dealt with sexualizing stress or sexualizing boredom. And what that means is like I would just use either sex or male attention. I'm straight, so male attention when I was feeling those things. So just like addiction, that's not a process addiction. Drugs, food, or actually food is process, but like drugs, alcohol. If you're feeling a certain way, you don't want to feel it, you go to the drink, you go to the drug. But in my case, I went to, who am I going to text next? Who am I going to see if I can hang out with later tonight? And so I personally had done my own stuff around sex, and then I was able to bring it to my practice.
Yeah, well, I love
Thank
that.
you for sharing that.
Yeah, and thanks for being so vulnerable about that. I think we have to start understanding that we're relational beings. And so we all have a relationship to sex. Now it's about investigating what is my relationship to sex and how do I improve my relationship to sex? How can I have a relationship to sex where it's a good thing and not a shameful experience? Or if you have trauma around sex, like I do, a lot of that, how do I repair that relationship where it can be a loving experience?
Yeah.
And so I think the first step is like, okay, well, let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
It's here, right? It's gonna, and I think like, bring it back to the parents. I think it's ignorant to think your kids are not going to know what sex is. And I think they're either going to learn it from you,
They're going to learn
in
it
a
from a
healthy
friend.
way, or with the internet available.
Yeah.
With the internet available, they're either going to learn what it is in a healthy way from having a really good conversation with you about it, or they're going to find out through porn. And I heard from someone that a therapist had told a friend that kids are now finding porn at 5 years old.
Oh, shut up. Yeah, I mean, if you randomly are on YouTube or something, like you never know, something can pop up. I mean, hopefully it doesn't when my kid's watching Cocomelon, but like, yeah, they can accidentally click on something.
How do you think sex and sexualization and relationships has changed with social media, with TikTok?
Oh my God.
With
Great question.
with the availability of, we were talking about it the other day, just women being, and men as well, being put in a position where they have to sexualize themselves in public to gain an audience, to gain a financial place in life, whatever the reason is, right? So
Yeah.
how do you think that's changed, and where do you think the trajectory of that's going?
It's funny because I obviously grew up in a time where there was no TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. And I still used my sexuality to gain attention.
Oh, me too.
Right.
I mean, like that was like, I mean, I was also like taller and bigger, and I had my period at a younger age, so I had boobs really young, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to use these for attention. Like it's there.
Right.
Now we got social media, and it's like, oh, we can really expand my view. And what's so sad is that it took me, X amount of years to figure this out, is external validation's never going to build self-esteem. Like you have to have it from inside. And so whether or not you want all those views or want all those likes or this person to like me or whatnot, it's like, if that's what you're basing your self-esteem on, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think it is confusing for teenagers because if I'm posting a picture and my boobs are out, and evidence says I get more likes on this photo than I did on this photo where my boobs are not out, and I'm a human being and I need attention to feel a sense of existence and love, well, I wonder what I'm going to continue to do.
Right. It's interesting, right? Because a lot of people get into this. You have this entire new industry, right, where people, they don't want to go to college. They don't want to get a degree. They don't want to go into a specific field that has been the norm, in a sense, a doctor, a lawyer, when they could be a TikTok star and make millions and millions of dollars, right? And so they created careers around this, right? Now, I'm not taking away from TikTokers or Instagrammers that are creative in their nature and they create either funny videos or videos you can learn from, whatever it is, right? But there's a lot of videos that are centralized around sex and sexual behavior and looks and all these things. And I'm not trying to take away from that. That's obviously an empowering thing. But like, how do you convince somebody of that nature, right? Like you said, like this picture, I got 10,000 likes. This picture, I got 100 likes. But the picture I got 10,000 likes brings me the fortune that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It brings me the independence. It brings me.
I'm all for like however you want to monetize your life and do whatever. Like I actually have a client, she's in the adult entertainment industry, and we were talking about how actual porn for her was kind of actually really traumatizing. But she has an OnlyFans account. So we swayed, we talked about it. I obviously didn't like push her one way, but she was like, oh my God, I have autonomy. I get to choose who I have sex with. I don't have to rely on someone else's schedule. And it was like, okay, so she started doing more OnlyFans versus the other stuff. Right. And like, to me, I was like, that's great, because now she's not going to be abused by directors or agents and all these other things that was causing her trauma. And it's like, this is amazing. So it's like, in some senses, I'm like all for the media in that sense.
Interesting. Speaking of porn, let's talk about that. Some people are okay with porn.
Yeah.
Some people are not okay with porn. Some people are married and in relationships where porn is completely acceptable. Some people need porn to masturbate. Some people don't need porn to masturbate. What are your thoughts?
It's going to be different for everyone. I actually wrote my, what's it called? It wasn't a thesis. It wasn't a thesis because I went to for MFT, but it was basically like a thesis. Anyways, I wrote it on the internet and couples and stuff. And it's just so funny because I think you just need to have a definition, whether it's for a couple or for an individual, on what is considered like cheating. Because some people in relationships are like, oh no, porn is cheating. And it's like, well, they don't actually touch each other, but maybe, if I asked someone on an account to do something for me, that would be cheating. I think it's just the individual person, if that's what does it for them, that's what does it for them. If it's in a couple, I think the most important part is to kind of have an understanding of what is comfortable for each partner.
I think having that conversation, isn't it interesting that it always comes back to, can we have a conversation?
Yeah.
Can I hear why you like porn, and can I understand why you don't like porn? Can I hear why this might be triggering for you if I watch porn, and can I explain why it's not triggering for me about me watching porn?
Yeah, so. I've talked to many couples where it's like, oh, I hate that my husband watches porn, and in my head I'm like, oh, that's so, it's natural, masturbation is natural, and all those kinds of things. And I have others that are like, oh, I love that my husband does it, because or my boyfriend does it, because I don't have.
That watch it together.
There's couples that watch it together. It's just you have such a range that it's like, just talk about it.
But I do want to talk about the fact that it does create this false connection to sex and love.
Oh.
Because you start envisioning that, oh, this could be fun, or this could be exciting, and you don't, like you said, you don't have a conversation with your partner, and you start incorporating some of these things, right? And so that damages relationships in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say it's classified as cheating, but that's obviously my own personal opinion. But you create these falsehoods, right? Where just like social media, just like anything else,
you start thinking that's what sex is.
Right.
So if you're watching some video and it's BDSM and it's gagging and this and that, it's like, okay, if you're just having normal vanilla sex, it's like, okay, that's not what
boring.
It's like. And then, there's been studies where it's like, okay, these young men and boys who are starting to explore porn, it's like, if they're exposed to some pretty heavy stuff early on, it actually decreases their satisfaction for just plain old sex.
Oh, 100%.
So they have problems with ejaculation and coming to climax because they're so used to watching this, intense stuff that they're exposed to at an early age. So I actually was nervous for my son. I want to be like, honey, make sure that he can only watch 70s porn. Make sure,
taboo porn.
Make sure when he's older, he can't watch all that crazy stuff because I'm I want him to be able to have normal sex and actually enjoy it.
Right.
Well, I remember watching a show. I want to say it was Euphoria, and I love Euphoria. And one of the things they were showing on the show was one of the characters was learning what sex was through porn. So then he went and had sex with his girlfriend, and he was being violent with his girlfriend, thinking that that's what she wanted because that's what was shown on the porn. And some people like BDSM, some people don't. But again, I think it's every individual is different.
Yeah.
So explore through curiosity by asking questions.
Yes.
I think that's the theme of this.
I think
it is.
I think our themes today are actually consent, talking about it, and modeling.
Well, and I want to preface this by saying, because there's gonna be a lot of people out there who's like, consent again with this fucking word consent. That's out there, right? I want to say that by saying or asking for consent, it's not that you just ask for permission. It's having an open conversation with your spouse, your loved one, your child, right? So that you can both be on the same page, right? And so if BDSM interests you or, whatever, that's fine, but just be open and honest and transparent with your partner and say like, look, I'm interested in these things. This type of stuff arouses me. I want to know what arouses you. Is there somewhere where we can meet in the middle and maybe can satisfy both of each other in our needs, right?
Yeah, and it's like it's not just one conversation.
Right.
It's an ongoing conversation.
And I think for people who are in relationships for a long time, sex changes. Intimacy changes. And that's also very normal. And I think a lot of couples think that their relationship is dying if the sex is dying. And I think it's a normal thought, but also it doesn't have to die. It's you just got to get creative and realize that I read this book by this, I don't know if he was a sexologist or something, but she was talking about how technically we're not meant to be monogamous for the rest of our lives.
Probably Esther Perel.
I don't know who it was. And I don't even know if I believe that, right?
Yeah.
But she was saying that you have to be creative because as you're evolving, I'm evolving.
Yeah.
Right? And what you like might change.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people, they feel like, oh, if my husband or my wife is not interested in having sex, I'm being rejected.
Exactly. People take it really personally.
Yes.
If they're not wanted or whatever. And like for me, I could be exhausted. I could not feel good about myself. I could be touched out by my kids. Like, if they're all over me all day, I could have had a stressful day at work. Like, there's so many reasons why I might not be interested in sex.
Especially after you have a fucking baby. Yeah. Like, I know so many moms that go through this where they have the baby and the husband wants to have sex because they have a lot of testosterone that doesn't go anywhere. It's not bad, but also I think for people out there, they just had a baby. Yeah. Give it some time.
Well, also, I think people forget there's so many ways to be intimate that don't involve sex.
I agree.
So sometimes I have to preface with people, it's like, maybe ask your partner to cuddle that doesn't end in intercourse. And just say, you know what, honey, I really just want to be held tonight. And I just want us to snuggle, and I just need that from you tonight. And that's so intimate.
I kind of want to talk about or ask what type of advice would you give, let's say, because you as a husband, you try to, your goal is to understand where your wife is coming from and understand that after having a child, what that process looks like, and the connection that you once had might not be the same for a while because that connection with the mother and the child is there, right? What kind of advice can you give the men in those relationships or the partners in those relationships? Because that can take a year, that can take 2 years until the mother feels comfortable to get to that
there's so many
place,
reasons why, whether there could be pain down there for women. There's so many reasons.
Right.
Again, it's just talking about it.
Masturbate.
Yeah, I was going to be here's porn.
Right. Go jack off.
I'm just kidding.
But that goes back to
call back.
Now you're heightening okay, here's porn, and it's well, I want to do what they're doing, but my partner doesn't want to do what they're doing.
No,
for 2
I think,
years.
and again, it's let's talk about it and just talk about it and say, honey, what do you need to feel in the mood? You know, do I need to take care of you? Do I need to take my daughter out for a night? Do you need to go get a massage and your nails done? What is it that you need to be and feel sexual and to want to have that desire? Yeah. And obviously there's got to be patience in there. There's, you really can't go in there after, at least 6 weeks. So, but is there other stuff we can do that doesn't even revolve around intercourse? Right. Can it be the snuggling and the kissing, or can it be, or service yourself? But I think it just comes back to talking about it.
Service yourself. It makes me think of. That's a good way of saying it, because I think of a server.
I was like, I didn't even know I said that word, but it's go service yourself.
Yeah, no, I love everything that you're saying, and I think it's so valuable. And I think a lot of couples are trying to recreate the first 4 to 6 months in a relationship where the oxytocin levels are so high where it's just you just want to have sex 18 times a day. That doesn't.
I secretly want to go back to those times
too.
I'm I
wish
I had that.
I think everyone does. And I think that's just, I think that's normal. And I think also just getting more educated around what happens with the brain in the first year. And also when there's more stressors, if there's more stress, there's more disconnection, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
if you're not talking and if you're not interested in each other, disconnection can be created. So I love what you're talking about. It's like, have the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, how do we create me being aroused and you being aroused? And I think
Yeah.
like as you're saying it, I'm thinking to myself, God, that sounds so robotic. Like, hello, honey. How do you get aroused today?
Yeah.
Let me explain to you how I get aroused today.
Yeah.
Like,
It doesn't have to be robotic. It
Right.
can just be like, hey, honey, what gets you in the mood? Right? You know, I also want to say to you were saying, like, what do you say to the partner or whatever? It's like, you know, we have to also be patient. We also have to be kind and loving. But it also could be, it doesn't have to be the husband with the wife. You know, some people, it's just called an inequality of sexual desire. And it's never usually even. There's always one partner that wants more than the other one's giving.
why do you think that is?
I actually don't fucking know.
Yeah. I love that you say that.
Don't fucking know.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned earlier that people have addictions to process addictions, various vices, right? Whether it be alcohol, drugs, eating, not eating, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Exercise, porn, video games. Do you want me to keep going?
Right. So I want to, because obviously this is a show about mental health and it's a show about addiction, and it's you know, what would you say is has there been studies that show that this is a prevalent situation or a traumatic experience that leads to addiction to porn or addiction to sex?
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
It's all the same. It's literally, I mean, at least my approach to addiction is it's the coping mechanism to underlying trauma,
Right.
self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression, mental health disorders. So when you say, oh, they got a sex addiction, it's really, they just can't sit in their feelings.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's, I can't sit in my feelings, I'm going to eat. I'm going to sit in my feelings, I'm going to go have a drink. I can't sit in my feelings, I'm going to take a benzo. You know, whatever it is, I can't sit in these uncomfortable feelings. And so I'm going to act out and get out of my head.
And so what type of processes or steps can somebody, let's say someone's watching porn on a daily basis, multiple times a day, or they have multiple sex partners, or whatever the case may be, right? What are some of the steps? Obviously, there's therapy, there's know all that kind of stuff that they can take on a daily basis from a slow standpoint or a minimal standpoint to kind of start curbing that intensity of an addiction.
Okay, amazing. It's just being aware, asking yourself the question, why am I engaging? Like before you go find a video to watch and service yourself, call back there. Like just ask yourself a question. Just say, why am I doing this? What am I feeling right now? Don't stop it. I don't care. Go ahead and do it, but just ask yourself that question first. Like even with a drink, like why do I want that drink right now? What's going on for me? Oh, I'm bored. Oh, great. Okay. And the next day, why am I doing it again? Oh, I'm bored again. Or, oh, I'm feeling lonely. Or I'm triggered by X, Y, and Z. Just ask yourself that question, and then you get more information. Now it's like, okay, I have the information. What do I do about it? Okay, is there another healthier coping mechanism I can do besides the sex, the drugs, the alcohol, the shopping, the exercise, whatever it is that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with almost all of that. I 100% have used sex to escape pain. I've used alcohol to escape pain. I've used smoking to escape pain. I've used self-harm to escape pain. So the first step is 100% awareness. And I think you don't get the motivation to become aware unless you're experiencing negative consequences.
Yeah.
So I had so many negative consequences based on my relationship to sex and men. And so I think be open to exploring your relationship to the behavior, to the substance, whatever it is. Why do you think that so many people get their worth from sex? Where do they learn that?
I mean, social media now, like media in general, just natural interactions with humans, right? It's like catcalling, like back in the day. I don't even know if people catcall anymore.
Of course they do.
But it's like, it's just easy. It was just there, right? I mean, just even when I, went through puberty, just getting that attention right away, you're like, oh, someone looked at me for the first time. I actually, I liked that boy, and he finally looked at me, right?
Yeah.
So it's just natural that we aim for outside validation, and now it's like 50 million times fold with all the social media outlets.
I have a question going back to parenting and dealing with the conversation about surrounding sex. Let's say you're a parent in a situation where one of your children has experienced a traumatic connection to sex and the opposite sex or whatever. How should a parent approach a child in that type of a situation? Obviously, let's say the situation's a parent, the child comes to the parent, and I know that's a whole other process of the child even being comfortable enough to come to the parent. But I guess it's a two-part question. Let's say the child does come, like how can a parent approach that situation? And at the same time, for the child, how do they get to a place where they feel comfortable in sharing that with their parents?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just being there and listening and attuning and just saying, I'm here, right? That just, hey, what's going on for you? I'm here. And like not being judgmental, not being scared, not the reaction, right? You were talking about reactions before. If I'm like, oh my God, just being calm and being a safe place for them. And if you as a parent suspect something that is happening and the kid isn't talking about it, get a professional involved, right? There's ways to get the information from kids, whether it's playing with dolls or art or dance or anything, it will show up.
That's great advice, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, just in my own personal experiences, like most of the time that my daughter is talking is when she's taking a bath or before she's going to sleep and I'm reading her a book, all of a sudden everything comes out from what happened in the day during the day, right? So I like that advice.
Yeah.
I think sometimes too kids don't have the language to describe what happened to them, but they'll model it in the behavior. So pay attention to the
play.
behavior.
Yeah, if they're playing with a friend and they're just starting to do something weird, you're like, wait, they never did that before. Where did they learn that?
And don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Don't ignore it and pretend it's not happening. I think parents try to survive by pretending it's not happening, and it makes the situation worse. And so I think it's really important to educate yourself on this subject to really protect your kids and help them develop a healthy relationship to sex. And really, I think that's what protects children, and then that's what gives parents a feeling of trust within themselves, because ultimately I think parents, I know for me, I want to have my kid feel confident in himself and confident in himself to make good and healthy, positive choices, to treat people with respect one day when he's old enough to have sex.
Yeah.
Right? Not have it be this like horrible thing or this scary thing, but a beautiful, intimate experience.
Well, and going back to the second part of that question, let's say someone who has experienced a traumatic connection to that, right? What kind of advice would you give to them? Obviously, that's their own process and it takes their own time and whatnot, but what are the things that they can use to ask for help or to vocalize that? Like, what are some tools?
I mean, there are so many hotlines and resources online if anyone is a victim of some type of sexual assault. But I think the most important thing that I work on with clients who have had is it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And
is that where their mind goes, that it's their fault?
100%.
1,000%. Yeah, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And that they're valuable, right? Because that's shattered too.
I think I only recently separated myself from it was my fault.
Yeah.
So that is a huge...
I think that's the first place. It's like, oh my God, it's not your fault.
Yeah. And it's a big weight off your shoulders to get that out and to realize that.
Why is there instinct to go right away to it was my fault?
We have a natural reflex to protect ourselves, right? So we go into fight or flight.
Right.
And usually in these instances, that's not there. It tries and then it collapses and then we ended up submitting. So it's like we tried with our defenses to fight back or scream or yell or whatever.
Right.
And for some reason, the aggressor won. So when we take that away, it's like, I couldn't protect myself. I did something. Or, media's like, oh, she shouldn't have worn that dress to work if she didn't want that attention. Like whatever it is. So it could be as the actual trauma. It could be the whiplash after. So there's just so many reasons why. But that's the theme that I usually get with clients.
Yeah. I feel like too, like children live in developmentally, they live in such a narcissistic time in themselves. Like that's a natural stage where everything is about me. So if this is happening to me, then it must be something I did.
Yeah.
But it happens to adults too.
Yeah, 100%.
But even adults, that's the same thing. It's like my fault. Yeah, like I didn't scream loud enough. I
I wasn't strong enough.
I wasn't strong enough. I, flirted with this person at the bar and I took them home. I drank too much.
It's what I was wearing.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why it comes back to it's my fault.
Is that also because of how society has designed the relationship between men and women?
Well,
Or,
it could also be same sex. Can be the same thing.
Right.
I mean, there's just so many reasons.
Well, we're going to have you back to talk about the many different facets of all of this.
Yeah.
I think that I'm so excited that you're here to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I think you're a leader in this because I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we give permission for other people to talk about it, to have tools and language to express it, it's going to change society. So thank you so much for coming on here.
Oh, thank you.
Jess.
If there was one thing you could tell younger Jess, maybe about sex.
Yeah.
15 years ago. About
15
sex.
years ago.
What would you tell Jess?
I knew you were going to ask me this too, and I should have been more prepared. Okay, so based on sex, I would probably say gain self-esteem without external validation. I cared so much what other people thought of me, or if that guy liked me, or if I looked good, or if they wanted me, and it was like, no, just love yourself. I'm pretty cool.
You're pretty cool.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
If I say so myself now. So
If
that's what
I
I
do
would tell-
say so myself.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to go there. Well, thank you again for being here. And thank you to all of our listeners. We really appreciate you here on Got Mental Health. If you don't already, please rate, follow, and review our show on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And again, we love you all and look forward to seeing you on next week's episode with Arkel Moglefsky.
Arthur Moglefsky, Rachel.
Arkle!
Markle.
Say you Arkle!
Thank you, Jess.
Thank
It was
you,
a pleasure having
guys.
you. Have you back here soon, hopefully.
Okay, perfect.